Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talking Logistics, where we have conversations with thought leaders and newsmakers in the supply chain logistics industry. And it's my pleasure to welcome today's program Hope Federer, who is Senior Solutions Consultant at MercuryGate. And today we're going to talk about finding carriers in a capacity constrained market. And certainly, this is a topic that is something a lot of shippers are beginning to think about as the trucking market begins to get more constrained. And they're thinking about how are they going to find, capacity to move their shipments? And for those of you that were around back in, 2004 and lived through that really tight capacity environment, those that survived that are kind of thinking and looking ahead and saying, hey, we don't want to relive that negative experience. And what can we do today to kind of alleviate that? So certainly look forward to hearing Hope's comments and thoughts and what she's seeing out in the marketplace and with some of the customers that she works with. Just a reminder for those of you that are joining us live today that our goal here at Talking Logistics is to make this an interactive discussion. So if you have any questions or comments for Hope, you can do so via the submit a question button or the chat feature, and I'll go ahead and if we've got time and it's a good and appropriate question, I'll try to weave it into the conversation. And finally, if you're joining us as a visitor, you will need to register first before you can ask a question. So with that, Hope, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Before we kind of dive into the topic, I'm always curious about how folks got into the industry. So, as a way to kick it off, I mean, why don't you tell us a little bit briefly about your career path? How and why did you get involved with supply chain logistics, and what's your current role and responsibilities there at MercuryGate?
Absolutely. So I got started in supply chain more in a brokerage standpoint, working with Railvan Global Logistics that later on was purchased by Pacer. So started in as a dispatcher and worked my way up the ranks to becoming a director of operations, but not only being the director of operations, but also running their agency network and the training department. But I also headed up the procurement and pricing division of Pacer for their over the road. So that encompassed both brokerage, the automotive just-in-time environment, including the 3PL business. So really getting a firm grasp on that. And I was in the industry, actively managing operations for over 14 years. So definitely am familiar with the 2004 capacity constraint. And actually that was when a lot of companies starting to take that transition to having, those procurement managers really looking at that. Went into, starting a little bit at Cardinal Health and made the switch over into the technology world with MercuryGate. Oh, last year actually. More so because of seeing what the benefits of a TMS are to transportation management companies. So making that shift into the role that I am today, where I go and talk to and introduce the software to specific clients that are maybe looking for a fit to grow their business or to fill some gaps that they have in their current legacy systems. So I bring the business side into the technology advantage.
Great. I think that's so important. I'm always fascinated when folks kind of come out of the operations side, whether it's working at a service provider or where they manage transportation at a manufacturer or retailer, and then they kind of move into the technology side. And I always say, it's always great, whatever role you're in, to have that frontline experience working at a technology company because you've actually lived it. You've actually that was your life. You've been in those shoes before in terms of the customers you're trying to fulfill, so you can immediately relate to what they're going through or what they're trying to accomplish, and didn't just come at it straight from kind of a pure coding standpoint or IT standpoint. um, so let's talk about now kind of the capacity environment. If you look at the data from a variety of different sources out there, certainly capacity is starting to tighten, and I think what I've tell shippers is that in some ways, we've kind of have avoided the worst of it because the economy has kind of taken its time to recover. But as it does recover, the signs that the capacity crunch is coming is becoming more evident, and we've seen that in some of the data out there. I mean, what are you hearing, from your shipper and 3PL clients? Are they starting to feel the effects, and if so, in what ways?
Yeah, they are starting to feel the effects, but I think it's a little different. The shipper standpoint, really, transportation was a means to an end. That wasn't their main function. They were either doing the warehousing, the supplying, and then the transportation was getting it to the end buyer or vendor. So they really are consciously looking at transportation as an area where pricing has started to go up as capacity is starting to get tight. Service areas are starting to change, so needing to find a variety of different providers for where they're servicing. So they're looking at it being more of a conscious effort at really focusing on transportation and figuring out what is beneficial to their line of business, also to see if they can find any reduction in spend. And that means that they need to be a little bit smarter in their planning, their notification of the carriers, and also qualifying their carriers so they have less claims and those types of things. So they're a little bit more planning of their optimization of their runs, how many stops, because that can really deter a carrier. And if are they looking at that, long haul with pooling at the end and then final mile delivery. So they're looking at it from their approach and how they're running the business, and trying to be a little bit more proactive. Where the 3PLs really are looking at it from a management of the transportation standpoint, where they're not really housing everything. So, are they being a little bit more proactive when they're doing their annual bids, taking into consideration some of the standard capacity constraints that you're looking at, seasonality, increase in fuel. We always have that retirement of drivers that are the long haul drivers. So, looking at their network of, the providers that they have, are they dealing with the larger carriers, and really trying to diversify themselves with the providers. With a shipper standpoint, they have the product, so they have a little edge up. Where a 3PL, they don't have the product that they're distributing. They're doing it on behalf of somebody else. So really establishing that stickiness with their carrier base, and you're not putting all their eggs in one basket with a larger provider, really diversifying their carrier network.
That's interesting, in terms of kind of the approach that shippers and 3PLs are taking to this. I think it's something that, you might assume that they're both responding to the capacity constraints and what's happening in the carrier market the same way, but in reality, they obviously they're coming at it from different perspectives and different driving forces that are going to lead to different actions that each of them take. And of course, shippers work with 3PLs and brokers and so forth. So there's that added, mix as well, because, a lot of 3PLs kind of sit on both, they have to deal with both sides, the shippers that are looking for capacity and the carriers that are providing it. So I think that's a kind of an interesting role. When and we're seeing this, happening right now, when capacity gets tight, shippers tend to, leverage the spot market more. But there's always that risk of, service or safety issues when you go down that route. I mean, what are some of the best practices that you see out there when it comes to finding, reliable carriers using the spot market?
Absolutely. So really a lot of the shippers and 3PLs alike are taking a very similar approach to have that mitigation and manage that risk management approach. So really, focusing on the business core of what is your carrier due diligence. Even if you're having to go out to the spot market and potentially bring in a spot transactional provider that isn't part of your network already, really staying true to your corporation's due diligence. What is your checklist for an authorized and approved carrier? And where within that due diligence do you have that gray area? And that gray area is really what comes into play with the spot market. So, the service ratings, the basics, what are your views on those combination of the basics. Also considering the DMB. How is the carrier in financial status? Is it someone that is looking that they're in tight strength? So a lot of those things come into play, but not just that. It's time sensitivity. If you're going out to the spot market and you're at that point in going out into the spot market, you're really under the gun to get your freight covered. So having that gray area of that ability to waiver some and your stringent due diligence really comes into play. But the best practice is to continue to stay in focus with what your corporation's due diligence is, and then going from there. A lot of additional monitoring of the freight comes into play as well from an operational standpoint.
Now, have things changed significantly since, certainly there's a lot of discussion still ongoing after all these years around hours of service. And then certainly CSA is something that, that there's a lot of discussion and debate around. Have you seen much change in kind of the impact that hours of service CSA has had in terms of the way companies approach kind of the spot market?
I think hours of service more than CSA. I mean, they still, from the CSA standpoint, they still are really looking at what are the safety ratings as the end all be all. And then going back, and because that's been stagnant for quite some time, are they satisfactory, unsatisfactory, contingent, those types of things they're really looking at. And then building into the basics, the combinations of the basics, because the CSA scoring is still under review how it's being approached. Is it as dynamic as you're hearing? Is it as stringent as you're hearing? Or is there kind of that neutrality that you're not 100% confident in how those scores are being applied? Um, Hours of service, I mean, they are changing, and there's the conversation of them changing again. Ensuring in the spot market when you're tendering the loads out to the providers, you can't just automatically assume that the driver is fresh. So really communicating your expectation of service around the move to the dispatcher that you're talking to, or even the driver. So, I mean, you're needing to put that out there. Where if you're working with your core carrier base, you've already established what your expectation is in hours of service, and how they're going to be operating the freight. So I think hours of service, definitely, if you're time sensitive, being they are, shippers and 3PLs are being more verbal of what their expectation is in service.
No, great point. So let's talk a little bit about technology and specifically transportation management systems. Obviously, if you're still managing transportation with spreadsheets and fax machines, I think you're going to have all sorts of different challenges. But obviously, one of the benefits of a TMS is that it allows you to manage your carriers more effectively and understand what's happening with your transportation activities and network in a more detailed fashion. And I would think that one of the goals is to leverage a TMS to more effectively manage the carriers that you already have contracts with, that you've got relationship with, and to ensure that you're kind of getting the capacity that you've contracted for, as kind of step one in mitigating the risk of a capacity crunch. So how can shippers use a TMS to manage a contracted carrier more effectively, is to ensure that they're getting that capacity that they contracted for.
Yeah, absolutely. So with a standard TMS, the ability to not only capture your contracted rates, but also the capacity commitments. So being able to take it to the granular level, is the capacity by day, is it by week, is it by month, is it live load, is it a pooling situation? Those are some of those considerations. But the other thing is with a TMS, being able to log in those commitments and then having that fulfillment as you're executing the freight against those commitments. When you come to say month end quarter close, you're going to see where you are in those commitments, especially if it's daily, weekly, monthly, or even annual commitments. And really holding the carrier to, I wouldn't say the fire, holding them to the agreement that's been made on that capacity commitment. The other approach that people are starting to make and really depend on a TMS to help support is around that capacity commitment tiered pricing. So already knowing if they know their business, and when they start to see that trending in the capacity constraints, they know that going into some of their bidding approaches. So, automotive, you have your month end and your quarter close. There may very well be some capacity agreements around those contractual rates and the awards that at certain times of the year, the rates go up because capacity is tighter, but your level of expectation is there that since you're paying more, the carrier is going to provide you that capacity. So really depending on that TMS to support that for you in the multiple tiers that you may be operating your business. The other thing is really considering that the TMS can help you facilitate what your due diligence check is around your carriers. So there are several applications out there outside of the TMS that interface in RMIS TransCourse, Carrier Watch, Carrier 411, just to name a few that do that due diligence check, that really feed into the safer ratings and those types of things. But utilizing a TMS, those external services can actually interface in and have some automation take place. So your end users are only utilizing the carriers that are approved under your due diligence check, and the information's now. So if the scores change or the safety rating change or the insurance expires, you're finding out now versus at a later date. So really being able to utilize that TMS for all of that, including extra capacity. A lot of people forget, even if the carriers provided you a capacity commitment, your clients may very well be giving you an overage of freight. So how can you leverage those continuous move opportunities within a TMS is so much greater than looking at it on a spreadsheet. So knowing where you're already sending out a truck, your customer may actually have an overage of volume that they're trying to offer to you, that you can capture that capacity and turn it into a continuous move. So really leverage the TMS to provide you that insight when then there's capacity to a load match.
Well, those are all, great examples. I mean, I know one of the things that a lot of shippers look at is, and I think is another important aspect of a TMS, is the business intelligence dashboard, and being able to follow those, some of the key metrics around your operations that can help in this environment. So for a lot of shippers, is looking at the tender acceptance rate, and to see how that's trending, and whether contracted carriers, and particularly those at the top of the routing guide, are accepting at an acceptable level, if they're rejecting more loads. And then certainly, I think the other point that I think is important that you brought up is making sure that you as the shipper are also meeting your agreements in terms of providing the loads that you've kind of agreed to provide to an individual specific carrier, on a weekly or a monthly basis, and making sure you're keeping your commitments as well. So I think all of that is important. Going back to the spot market, I mean, can that be integrated with the TMS, as well, or are shippers still kind of, when it comes to spot, still dialing for diesels, picking up that phone and just trying to find whoever can pick that load up?
Absolutely, it can be integrated. I mean, you're looking at two different approaches from the spot market. Going out and finding posted capacity and then posting your available loads. So TMSs today have that capability to interface and bring in that available capacity that's been posted. That's one of the approaches. So you're not, that's where your dialing for diesel comes into play, bringing in that available capacity in the snapshot and really determining if you're going to engage that carrier. Now, if your TMS is truly very robust, it's going to take that posted capacity carrier and bump it up against your carrier network and let you know, just by looking at that list of available capacity that's been posted, if that carrier's already in your network, you right there have already reduced your risk. So you are going to be engaging a carrier that's already in your network. The other possibility, if you're not going to be dialing and calling out, is having those calls come in. So being able to have your load and management within your TMS, but post it out to public boards. So getting it out there, and not only getting it out there, but having the TMS manage it for you. So if you make any changes to the rate or to the lane, have it automatically go out to the public board and do an update. Or once you secure capacity on that load and you tender it out, having it automatically be brought down from that posting service. It really allows you to have that capability of, moving forward with your business and not being consciously aware of something outside an external system that you have to go out and continue to manage as well. The other thing that you're finding, shippers and 3PLs, they are kind of starting to focus, when it comes out to the public boards, a little bit more like a broker, in the aspect that if they have lanes coming up and they have been seeing a consistency and a capacity constraint, they may post the loads from their TMS out to those boards and capture the return capacity. So being able to be a lot more proactive if they need to tap into those public boards. That way they can get those potential carrier names over to their procurement team, and they can start the carrier onboarding process before they even really need to engage the carrier when those spot transactional opportunities.
Great examples. I just want to remind our viewers here, we're kind of coming up short on time. So if you do have a question or comment for Hope, now's the time to ask it. Kind of staying on that topic a little bit with the load boards. I mean, one of the things that I see, some shippers do, particularly those that have a private fleet or their own assets, is it's also utilize those boards to post their own capacity for backhaul opportunities, and certainly being able to manage, the capacity that they own themselves with the common carriers, and then also use the load boards as another way to, further leverage their assets. Do you see that with some of the customers or 3PLs that you work with that may have their own private fleet?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're wanting to have those continuous moves for their own private fleet and fill those empty miles. So they will definitely post out their capacity and get leads fed back in to onboard new clients, and get that continuous move if it's a continuous lane that they're having those deadhead miles. So being able to get that out there. They also though are utilizing the TMS not only to post out their capacity to public boards, but to post their capacity internally to potentially other divisions of their organization utilizing the TMS. So the capacity is considered just with every other carrier's, the common carrier that's posting their capacity within the TMS, it's seen as the same. So not only being able to go out to public and bring on new clients, but also to reuse the capacity, your private fleet capacity, within your own network of business units. So that really is also becoming a big thing because shippers aren't just one segment. We're finding that there are several segments to a shipper, that may be different product, different types of things, but the private fleet is able to handle the freight for any of those different divisions. So it's kind of a twofold.
Now, do you see that happening as well with, companies that might be working with a 3PL for dedicated capacity? So it may not be their own trucks per se, but it's dedicated vehicles or dedicated capacity they have with a 3PL. And how does that dedicated fit into kind of the whole picture here of what we're talking about, and particularly with a TMS and managing that dedicated capacity you may have with a 3PL as part of the overall options that you might have to move product, from point A to point B?
So from a 3PL perspective, I mean, there's several obviously different approaches. If they are working with a dedicated fleet or driver fleet that's working for them, really trying to continue to keep those drivers moving. So a lot of that capacity is also used in target selling. So if they're calling their customers that they already have and they're looking for additional business, it makes it easier for them to go in with a target sale of already having capacity in their hip pocket and offer up that capacity to them, saying, I have trucks in this area today, or I have them every Tuesday and Thursday. I know that you have freight coming back out. We're delivering in. What can we do for you? So utilizing it from that point. But also, a lot of them are trying to um, do that inside sell for the carrier. So posting it out to the public boards, the capacity is, a little bit of a tedious exercise because you're not really the carrier themselves. You are supporting the carrier. So having that agreement that you're going to post it out there and work with the carrier to post the capacity. A lot of 3PLs are starting to do that, but they definitely have that intertwined working relationship with those carriers and those drivers to do that on their behalf. Most of them are still utilizing it as a target sell as they're trying to grow the business.
Great, great. So, we're kind of coming up on time here, so let me go right to my last question here, and kind of as a way to wrap up. I mean, what advice would you give to, shippers and 3PLs that are looking, for ways to mitigate the risks of truckload capacity further tightening in the weeks and months ahead?
I think a lot of shippers and 3PLs are starting to do that year-over-year trending view, seeing what's happening in capacity, see what's happening with their volumes and also their rates and the timing to get it covered. So really being consciously aware of your business network year over year. The other thing is having a core strategy in your carrier network, a strong due diligence check as you onboard the carriers, those types of approaches that you're staying true to. The other thing that I would say is one of the keys into the capacity is, what's out right now with the analysts and the publications really are talking about the additional things up and coming, knowing your business, knowing the legality that's being discussed right now in your marketplace. Are there regulation changes that could very well hit your business? Thinking about the emissions laws out in California, are those coming eastbound, and all those trucks that are having to now retrofit their aged equipment? That's going to help drive up price. But not only that, as trucks are getting either purchased or being worked on, it's going to reduce the volume of capacity. So knowing what's in the pipeline and how it could impact your business. The other thing is, if you're really finding that, when you're looking at your year-over-year analysis, that your tight capacity is in your longer haul, is your network something, if you have multiple providers, that you can do multiple leg moves, where you're reducing your long haul miles and are able to utilize a network to have shorter runs but utilize all of your facilities more effectively?
To that last point, I guess I'll ask one quick follow-up question. You hear a lot over the years about collaboration, right? Uh, and that's certainly another strategy that, shippers can employ in terms of looking for ways that they can share capacity with other shippers. What are you seeing there? I mean, are you seeing more shippers talk about that, look at that, see that as an opportunity to perhaps leverage a TMS to facilitate that, or maybe approach, someone like yourself and MercuryGate and other TMS providers, to help facilitate that?
I am. They are looking for not only, say, pooling opportunities or shared services, but they're also considering mode shift. So, what can they go from LTL to truckload or truckload to rail? And they really are engaging their TMS providers, or if they're in the market for a new TMS, what are the optimization tools that can help them best utilize not only their carrier and the carrier rates that they already have on file, whether that be LTL, truckload, or rail, but also utilize their network and their network of facilities. So, can they leverage the location of their network as a whole to really reduce not only rates, but also increase the available capacity because of the lanes that they're running?
That's a great point. I mean, I'm certainly seeing a lot of increased interest among shippers as well around transportation modeling and being able to do these what ifs analysis, to see if there's opportunities not only for, as you noted, not only for collaboration but also modal changes or just flowing the product in different ways, or making some other changes in their logistics or transportation network that could have some positive effects there. So with that, Hope, thank you very much for your time today. As always, we always just manage to scratch the surface on this topic, but this is going to be an area that's going to continue to drive a lot of conversation in the weeks and months ahead. So I'm sure that we may want to touch base again at the end of the year and see how things have fared. Again, thank you for making the time to be with us today.
It was my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
And I thank you that joined us live today. We didn't get any questions live, but if you're watching this program on demand and you've got a question or a comment for Hope, you can go ahead to talkinglogistics.com, find this episode, and post a question or comment there. And I'm sure that Hope will be more than happy to answer your question there. So with that, thank you very much, and look forward to seeing you in a future episode of Talking Logistics. Have a great day.